Hello, friends. Welcome to the Veterinary Life Coach podcast. Today, I have an exciting and interesting guest for you. Her name is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg, and she is a certified group therapist and a diplomat of the Academy of Cognitive Therapy. She is an author and the co-founder and clinical director of Thru My Eyes, a nonprofit 501c3 organization. She's also adjunct faculty at New York University and teaches a graduate course in Mindfulness Practice. She's a blogger for Psychology Today and publishes a new guided meditation every Thursday morning on her YouTube channel. She also has a new book out called Ace Your Life, Unleash Yourself Best, and Live the Life You Want. No, did I say that wrong? Unleash your best self. Did I mix that up?
Yes, unleash your best self and live the life you want. You got it.
I don't know how that got, it must have been a typo. It got switched, but it didn't make sense when I said it. So welcome to the podcast, Michelle. I'm thrilled to have you here now that I got through that mouthful of an introduction. And I want to tell the people that are listening that her bio is way longer than that. I cut it down. So hopefully we'll learn more about all her accomplishments as we go. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So excited to have you. So my first question always is to everyone, tell me your story. So tell me your doctor story. I usually say veterinary story, but tell me how you got to where you are.
Yeah, it's been a process. I think, I believe that we evolve as we age.
Like life, right?
Yes, yes. And we're always evolving, always, always, always. It's so interesting because just this morning, I was looking at Facebook and I got triggered. So I'm going to start off with
good. Let's talk about that because that happens to a lot of us, right?
Yeah, but it was so interesting because my brain went right to how I felt when I was a kid socially. Because there was a social construct that happened on Facebook that I had a reaction to.
Right.
And I felt literally viscerally in my body like that teenager, And then I had to I was like, come back here, Michelle. Come on, let's come back to the present
Like you're a
moment.
doctor. You should know better than this.
Yeah, exactly. I go, but our brain doesn't. Our brain
I know. It's funny, right?
It's reptilian and it's very primitive. So our brain does not know the difference.
Right.
So I literally had to ground myself and say, okay, I feel very helpless. I feel very hopeless in this moment because that's how I felt. But I'm an adult now, and now I can have choices, make decisions, and I'm not that kid. And it was like, but this is like kind of the way we live our life. These are things that happen all the time. So going back to my story, I had a bit of a rough childhood, in a lot of different ways. And it started out with going to 5 different elementary schools, which you could only imagine what that must be like for a kid. Always transitioning, adjusting, having, again, socially to reinvent myself, always being around, like feeling like the outsider and all of that, because my parents divorced since I was 3, which is very young. And there was just always a lot of chaos and, turbulence, let's put it that way. So in some ways, I felt like I was a parentified child. I had the wisdom and wherewithal, I don't know how, to kind of know better. And I decided that I want to live a different kind of life growing up. And again, a lot of it has to do with intergenerational trauma. So I do want to say that. It's so interesting because my sister's living with me right now. She's from my father's second marriage, and she's 15 years younger than I am. And we're both in very different places. She's single, never married, I have 4 children, etc. So we had to talk about our dad. Like we had this really earnest conversation about our dad and our perspectives and all of this. And it's just so interesting, like the perspective taking based on who you are and your experience. And although we have the same dad, our experience, because it literally is in a different generation, is very different. And also, so she's in a space where I was when I was that age, when I was single with him. It's so
you thought
interesting.
similarly to her then, but you
Yeah.
don't.
Well, she went through a stage where she was always like didn't understand where I was coming from in terms of my reactions and behavior toward him. And now she said to me, she's having a hard time reconciling how to have a relationship with him, and yeah, so this was interesting. So I, of course, was talking to her about being a good enough daughter, you know, and what that means. And being a good enough daughter doesn't mean what the other person perceives you to be. You get to define what that is as an adult,
Right.
what boundaries you want to set, etc., based on your relationship. And we had like I was up literally with her till 3 in the morning having this conversation. So anyway, when I was in college, I took my student loan money and I put myself in therapy by myself, independently. Yes, my student loans.
That's a mature decision, isn't it? Because that's
Oh
a hard thing
yeah.
to do.
And I don't know where that came from. I have to be honest with you. I really don't. I think I remember being so little and being so resilient and independent since I was little. And my dad used to say to me, you just like walked off and didn't care about anything. Like you were just like in your own element. And I actually remember sitting in my bed at night crying sometimes and saying, this too shall pass, and saying to myself, this is not like the destiny of my life. Like I could make things different. And I swore to myself literally that I wasn't going to repeat the generational patterns and trauma of my family and my history and my traditions. And I sat yesterday and I even was sharing this with my sister and I had like tears coming down my eyes and I almost feel choked up talking about it. But like I look at my kids and I'm like, my mind is blown, like, wow.
Because you did
Like,
it differently.
yeah,
Good.
wow. I could really be proud of myself. Like,
Right.
because all I wanted was my kids to be good humans. That's all I wanted.
Right.
What they choose to do in their life and whatever, I am so open and embracing of them and love them, unconditionally. But I just really wanted them to be good humans and to be thoughtful of other people and to have thriving relationships. And you know what? Check, you
It's all
know?
good.
Yeah. And you know what? I've done my job. Like I feel like if I died tomorrow, I'm okay. Like
Yeah.
I really do feel that way. So living, again, I dedicated my life towards the service of others because I love helping others. And it's funny, I used to think like, oh, anyone could do this. What's the big deal? I really used to think that way. And I realized that's not the case at all. Yeah. Like I value my skills. I really do. And I value my relationships with my clients, my patients, and I see what they get out of it and how their lives are transformed. And it is so it's such a passion of mine, so I'm proud of myself. I could actually say that. And I don't say that with arrogance. I say it with self-love, actually.
Yeah. So how do you think that came to you as a child that this was going to be different? What do you think was in you
Mhm.
that allowed that? Because you didn't have an example to follow, correct?
Yeah. So there's been research and studies done, the difference between a person who kind of goes this way or that way, right?
Right.
And what they found, according to research, is it's having one person in your life, and it doesn't matter who it is, actually. It could be a coach, it could be a teacher, whoever that believes in you.
Mm,
One person that believes in you, and it doesn't have to be a caretaker. And I've always cultivated in my life, for whatever reason, mentors. And they typically were older women. And I dedicated my book, actually, the dedication is to my women warriors, and I mentioned who they were. You
nice.
know, yeah, two of them are my grandparents, my grandmothers. But they were such fundamental forces that actually loved me unconditionally and showed me kindness and thoughtfulness, from a teacher to, you know, uh, like just in my walks of life, I just kept on stumbling. And again, stumbling is not really accurate because I sought them out.
Right.
I did. There was
Yeah.
something that I needed and I sought it out. And like I think about that resilience and I'm like, whoa, you know,
Yeah.
I identified a need. Again, it was subconscious. I didn't know what I was doing,
Right.
obviously.
Right. Well, for
Yeah.
those people that didn't have that, let's say they're adults now and they're like, oh, I wish I would have had that intuition or whatever it was that you had to seek it out. And because you said you felt good enough as a daughter, how do you start to create that for yourself if you're in that space of not feeling good enough?
Yeah.
Because
So
so many people are,
just to
right?
yeah, just to clarify that. And by the way, my all my work is on stuckness.
Yeah,
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, because
Yeah.
that's how a lot of people feel, right? Like I coach a lot of people on feeling stuck in vet med. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're all stuck in some way
Right,
because
right,
we're imperfect beings. So we're all
right.
stuck. We're all,
Yeah.
I mean, we can all relate to stuckness, all of us. You
Yeah.
know, and I almost wish, like, it's so funny because when I was publishing my book, the publishers were saying to me, "What is this about?" You know, like, I need to know what population it's served. You know, it was like like a challenge. And I said, "This is stuckness."
Yeah.
And I didn't use the word stuckness in my title, and I regret it so much now. I have to tell you. I wish I could go back and
Should have picked a
read.
different title. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, Ace Your Life is predicated under my method, which is acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. You know, so
Okay.
that I would have left just
Right,
the
right,
subtitle I
right.
would have changed. I would
Yeah.
have, unleash your best self and, work through your stuckness or something. I would have,
Right, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think I got a little bit off track. So yeah, it doesn't come to everybody. Not everyone is born with that intuition. So I
Right.
agree with you. Some people have a really hard time. And I just wrote an article on this about having a hard time connecting to self-reflection and self-introspection because our minds and our bodies are wired to reject it.
Right. Okay.
Right. And I did a TED talk on circumventing emotional avoidance. So we're always kind of challenged by avoiding negative emotions. And that has to do with our wiring. That has to do with our neurocognition. It has to do with how we're structured socially, emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise. It has a lot to do with literally the structure of our bodies. People don't
Right.
realize that. It's a
Yeah.
physiological, biological mechanism.
Yeah. They always
I
think there's
wish-
something wrong with them that, right? And it's
Yes.
really, it's a normal brain. They have a
Yeah.
normal brain and that's why they feel
Yes.
too. Yeah.
And it's literally a human condition. It's a
Mhm.
human condition. We all, and it doesn't even matter culture, socioeconomic status, race, religion. It cuts across all human beings. It doesn't
Right.
matter where you're from and who you are, honestly. That's why I feel like that. So that's why, if you're asking, like, how did I come to this and how could people acquire these skills?
Right. Right. That's what we
That's
want to offer them, right? We want to
that's
help
right.
them get to the place where they can start to feel more whole and less stuck, right?
That's exactly right. And that's why I felt so compelled, like this is my life's work. I felt so compelled to write this book
Yeah.
because for people who it's not innate or who people who don't I mean, listen, even if you're committed to treatment, and self-introspection, this is kind of a guidebook because it gives you a little bit of a structure on how to approach life and how to approach things and how to approach relationships. It literally cuts across any dimension,
Right.
so it gives this structure in terms of getting through any challenge or decision making or empowering yourself to take action. Because we could talk and we could express what we want. But as a coach, you know this, it's very different to take action on behalf of what you want. Those are two
Absolutely.
very different things. And we all the time say, I want this, I want this, I want this. But do we actually follow through and take action on behalf of what we want? And what gets in the way of that?
Right.
So the method that I use is predicated through acceptance, compassion, and empowerment. And that is, the ACE method. And that's what I found structurally helps to work through all of that. So, the way that I structure the book, which I feel is that mechanism, is we need to understand how our brain and our bodies are wired physiologically. So I really dedicate a chapter on
Mhm.
that. I dedicate a chapter on our values. Most of the work that I do is value based. Now, values are a guide to action, like having a reinforcement of your values and understanding what they are. And people will always kind of say to me, I know what my values are. And then when we go and we sit down, we do the work, very different. Very,
Yeah,
very different.
it's not something they're challenged to work on. I
That's
talk
right.
about that when I do sometimes talks is you think you know, but until you really challenge that and really dig into it, it's going to be difficult to, have it easily reached referred to, right?
And conceptualized.
Right.
Conceptualized. Yeah. So I did a workshop the other week and, somebody from the audience kind of stepped forward and they said, you know, I don't, my values are this and that. And I said, that's not really a value. So they said, what do you mean? So I said, well, let's talk about this a little bit. And we did in front of the whole audience. And then I kind of conceptualized it for her because I kept on digging. I'm like, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And then she got to the root of what the core value was. And she was like, oh my goodness, I never thought about it that way. Like
Right.
that really, really helps to ground me and conceptualize how I want to move forward. And I was like, that's it.
That's the
That is
idea.
that's the idea. And she
Yeah.
was like, thank you so much. She was so appreciative, and then and then I kind of the second, third, and fourth parts is acceptance, compassion, empowerment. But you have to understand what the barriers are. We have so many barriers socially, culturally, and otherwise that inhibit us as much as we want to do. We get in our own way for
Right.
very legitimate reasons,
Yeah.
very legitimate reasons. And we need to understand that because when that kind of comes up, instead of rationalizing behavior or whatever we do, we could catch ourselves very mindfully. We could notice it and then we could work through it. And then the second, half of each of those chapters really give very concrete exercises, skills. And then I round it out at the end with a guided meditation with a barcode that you could scan that helps to integrate all of the information because, I'm all about mindfulness. So
Yeah.
it really does help.
So going to mindfulness, and I'm probably
Sure.
going to drag you all over the place because that's how my
It's
brain
okay.
works. Um, I talk about that and try to practice it. And I think it's super important when you're working on yourself because that's kind of what it means to me. But how do you teach that to someone when you're speaking about values? How can you be mindful in this exercise that you're talking about to discover your values? Is there
Yeah,
a
so mindfulness is overarching, and I think people have a misunderstanding of what mindfulness is. I love John Kabat-Zinn's definition of it. To me, that really kind of hones in on what it is. He's like kind of the father who brought it to the West, mindfulness in a user-friendly kind of engaging way. But it's really being in the present moment on purpose. Again, non-judgmentally,
right? Paying
right?
attention to what's going on
Yes, yes, because we're
in you and
constant,
outside of you as well, right?
yeah, because we're constantly in the past, which leads to a lot of regret and shame, right? Or we're in the future, which leads to a lot of worry.
Right,
So we're hardly in the present moment. We aren't. And there's so many, listen, I teach a 15-week course on mindfulness practice. So you could
right.
imagine how much information. And every week I bring a lot of experiential exercises
Yes.
where people are forced to really, I mean, one of the things I always get on my on my evaluation is like, she had us do really hard things.
Well, it is
Sometimes,
difficult, right? I think
yeah.
I think people don't understand that when you start to work on yourself, it's not easy. It's not simple. And I think the more you do it, the more difficult it seems because the deeper you dig in and discover
Mhm.
things about yourself, you're like, "Oh, I didn't know that was there."
Yeah.
Now what? Now
Yeah.
what do I do with that?
Well, and also understanding that we have different parts of ourselves.
Right.
Different parts. So I was speaking yesterday to a client of mine who is in law school, and she made the top 35%,
Nice.
right, of her class because
Yeah.
she got her grades. But she's disturbed with herself because A, she worked so hard and wanted to get the top 5%,
Mm,
and some of her friends did. So
right.
she's A, feeling shameful and guilty that she's feeling envious over the people who got the 5%,
Right.
right? She's also feeling demoralized because she feels like it's not fair. Why didn't I get it? Because I worked so hard, just as hard as they did, right? And then she feels
Right.
shameful why she feels that way, or angry at herself why she didn't work harder,
Right.
whatever, you
Yeah.
know? And then she feels also shame and guilt why she can't be, why she has to focus on that, rather than what she did do, rather
So
than
it's
what she didn't
multi-layered
do.
shame and
Oh,
guilt.
It's a sandwich. Literally, it's a smorgasbord. I always say it's a smorgasbord. It's
Yeah.
thoughts about the feelings, feelings about the thoughts, feelings about the feelings, and thoughts about the thoughts.
And then it's
So
this
we
big mishmash of all of that.
That's right. And we end up getting the sandwich. And
Yeah.
guess what? Or bricks. Like if you think about it, it's literally bricks on your shoulder and you're like,
Yeah.
you're
Or
slowly
or
flailing.
you feel like you're spinning and all of these different emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was so interesting is I said to her, I said, you could have a wonderful day. Let's say you're planning a party. I don't know, right? And there's one glitch that happened through the planning. One glitch. The cake arrived late. I don't know, whatever. Your brain will completely ignore all the positive things that happen and it will hyper focus and overthink the fact that the cake came late. And that will be the construct of how the day was for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. I mean, that happens. Veterinarians understand that well because we see a lot of cases throughout the day,
Mhm.
and you can have 10 good ones, 12 good ones, 20 good ones. And then that one client that's upset or the case that doesn't go well, it collapses you. And that's the struggle. And that's why I started doing what I do is these people need to figure out how not to go there with that
Right,
negativity.
right. So it's not about not going there. So I just want to correct that because we can't help that.
Well, yeah, but in order to not dwell there, you have to work through that. I guess that's more what I mean. You have to
Yeah,
acknowledge that it's happening, but also not hang on to it. So tell us how to do that.
right. So that's easier said than done, right?
No,
Because
right,
if I say to you, get that out of your mind, or like, why are you focusing on that? Focus on that, right?
right,
Guess what your brain's going to do? When you resist, it persists.
absolutely,
So why? Because our brains are wired to protect us from danger and discomfort.
right,
So your brain wants you to remember that case that didn't go well so that you work your butt off, right? To make sure that doesn't happen again.
right. So you don't have to
And you
feel
don't,
that negative emotion again.
that's right. That's right. So
Yeah,
if I'm telling you not to think about it, you're going to be thinking about it actually even more
even
incessantly.
more, right,
Yeah, it intensifies.
right,
So it's not a strategy that works, but that's the strategy we use because of the discomfort.
right.
Yeah. So like you said, like what do you do with that, right? So how did I handle it with her? Because that's the question, right? And
Sure.
that's where the gold is, you know?
Yeah,
So first of all of those residual feelings that she's having and that she's kind of putting herself down and beating herself up for having the thoughts and feelings, that's one part of it,
right,
right? Because that's a very normal, typical, average reaction to being in her position. But what's happening is there's a part of her that wants to feel more gratitude and wants to embrace her accomplishments. And there's another part of her that wants to berate herself to ensure that this won't happen again. And
so
that
she can
she,
get to the 5% next time.
that's right.
Right.
That's what the struggle is. That's what the struggle is.
Mhm.
Okay. But she's only focusing and paying homage to the part of her, right? That is kind of, and I said to her on a scale, right? Where does one lie? Where does one part of you lie? And it's lopsided. The
Yeah,
part of her that wants to beat herself up and make sure she doesn't get, the 35% again and not repeat what has happened is more formative at this moment,
right.
right? So it's like lopsided. So what do you do to get it more balanced so that you can actually invite gratitude and you could invite kind of acceptance? And what is the fear that's getting evoked if you're part of the 35%? Because that's deeper. It's not just about, so what, 35%? What does that even
Right,
mean? Like, who
right.
cares?
Yeah,
But what does that mean? What does that say about you? What does that say about your performance? What does that say about, and on and on and on, right? And that's a lot deeper. And what it came down to ultimately was it reminded her, of when she was a kid, right? Her mom, for a couple of years, would in some ways berate her intelligence because she has two siblings that are like super smart and super, like top performers. And she she has to work hard for it. She's a top performer too, but she has
Right.
to work really hard, not as
Harder
hard as
than her
they do.
siblings. Right.
And even as hard as she works, she still doesn't perform as well as they do. But
Right.
that's just the way it is, right? That's just, so it's part of acceptance. It's part of recognizing what it brings up in her. It's part of recognizing that she, again, right? She falls back into that place of that child that reminds her of feeling inadequate. And she's actually relating her adequacy to being part of the 5%, or else she feels inadequate. And that's what it's
Right.
representing to her. That's a
Yeah.
false belief. That's a very false belief. And guess what? This lovely young lady, who is really lovely, by the way,
I'm sure
she
she is.
already, she already, 2 years before she's graduating, she already landed a job. She literally landed a job that she's going to have right out of school. My goodness, right?
That's a huge accomplishment, right?
I mean, beyond, but I could say that till I'm blue in the face and I could sing her praises and give her accolades to her all accomplishments, but literally goes in one ear and out the other. If you can't integrate it and feel it at the gut level, it's not worth anything, literally. So that's what I'm teaching her. I'm teaching
Yeah.
her how to balance so that she could take all of it in. And when those berating messages come to her, that she could conceptualize it in a way that is going to help her rather than harm her. And
Yeah.
that's what and part of the work, which we're going to do next, is really work on that more formative part, the part that kind of creeps up and reminds her of how, how non-accomplished she is, and etc. And it's interesting too, because her mom has actually changed. Her mom apologized for the past. She has made amends. She recognized that that really negatively affected her. Um, and I said to her, isn't it so interesting that as much as you've kind of reconciled that, yeah, your brain hasn't reconciled it.
Right. Because you have that emotional memory, right? I always
That's right.
tell people that as we have these stories that don't go away.
No.
And they come from maybe just one tiny thing that someone said when you were a kid, and that sticks in there. And so every time a similar circumstance or even a dissimilar circumstance comes up, you go back to that
Mhm.
brain story. Or yeah,
It's a
I
narrative.
call them our stories. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a narrative. And it has to do with our neural pathways. Again, it has to do with our brain structure. People
Mhm.
don't recognize that. It's part of our brain structure.
Yeah.
So it becomes part of the narrative and it becomes part of the neural pathway. And we
Right.
repeat it. We repeat it like all the stimulus around us, as soon as it looks, smells, tastes like that, boom. We don't even have any openness or curiosity about it. We
Right.
automatically go to that place in such an autonomic kind of, instantaneous way.
Right. Yeah.
It's automatic.
So how does the mindfulness practice help with
Mhm.
that?
Love that question. It creates space between the thinking and doing. It allows you to focus to be in the present moment. Now, the automatic response of our brain that I just talked about, it interrupts that, which is a beautiful thing, right? So like if we automatically go to that place, we could stop, we could notice, we could be more accepting, right? We could be more compassionate, and we could do what's in line with our values.
Right.
That's how it helps us. I mean, again, I'm talking in terms of the way I work and my method, right?
Right, right.
So
Well, it's
yeah,
similar to many things. I think the more we hear this, the better. So your method is going to speak to someone.
yeah. It's conceptualized. Like I said, it's kind of like a way that you step into the world,
Right,
and it applies, it's vast. So you could apply it to how, you present. Um, you know, listen, we all struggle. We all have our struggle, and it comes up for us all the time, and it's going to happen till the day we die, you
right.
know?
Yeah,
So
it's not something that you can cure.
no,
And people
no,
ask that, how do you get over this? And it's like, well, you don't really. You learn to
no.
deal with it in a better way, in a healthier way, right?
Accommodating. It's
Right.
actually accommodating,
Yeah.
which if you think about the word accommodating, like, it's such a beautiful word in some ways, right? Because
Mhm.
you're not like fighting against it, you're not resisting, you're not berating, you're kind of collaborating with, you're connecting to, right?
Right.
You're
Yeah.
inviting. It's a very
Right.
different word. Mindfulness, and again, this is according to research, because I think we need, the way also that I write personally, even my blogs, is I always couch everything in research and evidence-based practice, because I really believe we can't just, I find, which was a little frustrating for me, is I find a lot of self-help books are just kind of like opinion.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah.
opinion is great, don't get me wrong. And I believe people have really, really valued opinions.
Right.
But to me, it's not enough. To me, you need to know the history, you need to know the research. And then I could offer, what my, kind of my take on it and my feedback. And then you yourself as an educated consumer could decide how you want to kind of, right, relate to it all.
Right.
So, so mindfulness is about really, really being present and giving yourself that space. And according to research, okay, we see this, which is so powerful and meaningful. We see on MRIs, because we have sophisticated tech now, which we did not have in the past.
Right.
Okay, these are based on evidence-based studies. It actually changes the structure of our brain.
Which
So,
I find fascinating because I don't think that we can do that.
well, we couldn't. We didn't. We
Right.
couldn't.
Right.
We didn't
Yeah.
know we could,
Yeah. It's
because there
fascinating.
was no way to prove that.
Right.
But we see it on these scans that it replenishes the gray matter of our brain, which is the part that gets depleted as we age, which, affects focusing, concentration. I mean, so many different things.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that there's a mechanism by which we could replace things that get degenerated over time because of aging, I mean, mind blowing, literally mind blowing.
Right. Right. It is fascinating. So
Hmm.
that's from the mindfulness practice or the self work that we're doing on ourselves or both.
I think it goes hand in hand, quite honestly.
Right.
I don't think that you could do, I mean, I can't say this because not, you don't have, I think there's different ways of practicing mindfulness. So I want to be, clear about that.
Right.
It's not
Right. Explain
people,
that
people,
to us.
yeah. So people confuse, they think that meditative, if the only way to do mindfulness is through meditative practice,
Right. And that's not
that's
true.
that's a fallacy. That's a
Right.
fallacy. There's that thousands and thousands of ways you could do mindfulness practice. Meditative practice is a type of mindfulness practice.
Right.
And I do recommend mindfulness and meditative practice, meditation as a mindfulness practice, but
Sure.
you have to find the type of meditation that works for you. Just like with exercise, right? People come to me because I'm all about wellness. My first book was on wellness and health, etc. Right? So people will say to me, I can't find an exercise that I like to do, right? Carte blanche. And I'm like, really? There's a lot
How
of
many have you
exercise.
tried?
Yeah, well, that's right. And if A doesn't work, go to B, go to C, go to D, go to E, go to Z. I don't care
Right.
what,
Don't
but
stop looking. Right.
I don't care if it's Zumba, spinning, jogging, walking, hiking.
Pickleball, which
Uh,
is what I started
Exactly.
doing recently.
That's right. Like just find, you don't have to be tortured. You don't have to be unhappy in what you're
Right.
doing. Find the thing that works for you. Like that is, I mean, I'm an avid exerciser, and I like literally when I don't exercise, I don't feel good. When I
Right.
don't meditate, I don't feel good. My body craves it
Right.
because it really benefits me in so many ways
Mm-hmm.
that I really love it and I crave it. If you told me years ago that I would feel that way, I would laugh at you, literally,
Yeah.
because I would never believe that that would be the case, you
Yeah.
know? So same thing with mindfulness practice. You can't say, I can't find it. So when I sit here with people, I say to them, okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Let's try something. And inevitably we always come up with something that works for them.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it could be, and again, there's different skills. So like self-compassion, for example, we never learn self-compassion.
Right.
People say to me, like this person that I was just talking about, this law student, she says to me, she's like, I don't even know what that is. I don't even know how to do that. Like literally,
Yeah,
right?
because it's something we never practice, right? No one ever taught us these things.
No, we're taught to be
Classes, right?
we're taught to be compassionate towards others,
Correct. Yeah.
right? But we're not taught to be compassionate towards ourselves. So there's mindfulness practice skills and exercises you could do to learn self-compassion. There's mindfulness skills that you could learn to learn focus and concentration. There's mindfulness skills that you could learn to learn relaxation. I did a guided meditation last night on inspiration and motivation. There's all different things that we could do in order to increase parts of us that are underdeveloped. We have underdeveloped parts of us
Right.
that we need to develop, and that's okay. So whatever that is for a person, like, people always say to me, because I am an extremely disciplined person, extremely, and people say to me, I don't know how you do it. Oh my goodness. And I say to them, no, I don't have a different vein in my body than you have.
You just
I
decided that
seriously,
you wanted to be that way.
yeah, I seriously don't. Like, we're not any different, right?
Right.
So it's really about the doing and learning what gets in the way of that and fortifying that so that you can do. And then it's a beautiful thing because it replenishes itself.
Right.
Once you do, and then you feel confident and then you feel accomplished, guess what happens? Our neurotransmitters, our dopamine and our oxytocin and all the neurotransmitters want more of that.
Right.
And you crave. Like, I love doing things that make me feel proud of myself.
Right.
I love that feeling. I crave that feeling. So any chance I could get, if I could, again, right? I don't care if it's opening the door for somebody or saying a bless you or whatever the case is. I note that I do those things literally.
Oh, see, I like that. I stop there and say that again because I can see veterinarians because we do so many things throughout our day to help people, but I think we do it automatically and not mindfully, and so we forget when the bad things happen about all the good that we've done. So
That's right.
say that again because I
Yeah.
think they
So
need to hear it.
it also comes down to values, by the way. So
Right.
one value that I've identified as being very formative for me is thoughtfulness.
Okay.
So if somebody came over to me and they told me you're not thoughtful, I would literally
Hurt you.
laugh.
Oh,
It
you would
wouldn't.
laugh because you know better.
It wouldn't affect me. It, it
Right.
it it would have in the past before I've done all this work. It would have.
Right. Right.
And I would have perseverated over it. And I
Yeah.
would have gotten really felt very wounded. And I would have challenged in my brain whether or not I was thoughtful. I would question it. I would have self-doubt.
Right.
Now, you know what I say to myself? I might have had a thoughtless moment, but I'm a thoughtful person. That's
Nice.
what I say to myself.
Right.
And I say, you know what? I could do better. That wasn't my most glorious moment. Yeah, but I'm human and, I falter and that's
You let her
okay. And
go.
next time I'm going to do a little better.
Right.
And I'm not letting myself off the hook by any means.
Right.
And I embrace my guilt or I embrace my sadness or I embrace my disappointment over what I did. I absolutely take responsibility, accountability, ownership over what happened. But I also know who I am fundamentally as a person. So whenever I take thoughtful actions, I note it. And I don't care how small it is. Literally, I say to myself, I am leaning into my value of thoughtfulness. And that increases inevitably my confidence in myself. It increases my self-love, my self-compassion, my self-efficacy, my self-belief, and I could go on and on.
Right. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that's why you start with the values because once you know them, you can notice
exactly.
as you practice.
Exactly.
And that's mindfulness.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And I'm always, kind of striving for that.
Right.
It's kind of center, it's front and center in my mind. And I know what those are. I'm so clear about what those are.
Yeah. So if somebody is feeling stuck and very overwhelmed by their negative stories, by their history, by things that happened to them in their childhood, I mean, all those things. And I know you said you start with values, but what would you recommend to them
Mhm.
um, to let go of some of that so they can feel well enough to get someone to help them? Because I think some people just
Yep.
are so worried about what other people are going to think, or, they're just kind of, they feel so stuck that they can't even reach out for help.
Yeah, that's a great question. That really is a great question. And I think what helps people kind of move forward, especially when they're in this place of stuckness, some people are just not willing. and that's an issue, right? And we interact with people who are not willing, right?
Yes.
Which we may call difficult people that we interact with, right? A difficult
Right.
family member, a
Right. Or
partner.
they don't even understand that there is a possibility that things could be different. Yeah.
Yeah. Or they're not willing to see
Right.
themselves. And that's
Yeah.
just the way it
They
is,
don't
right?
want to.
Or to
Right.
recognize it. And that's why I say when we behave, it's never contingent upon somebody else's behavior or reaction to us. It's based on who we are and who we want to be.
Right.
And that's a very different way of living. And that's what I was talking to my sister about last
Yes.
night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms, I think what you were speaking to just a moment ago was forgiving our past self. So we could then move
Sure.
forward, right?
Right.
So
Right.
part of conceptualizing how we are, how we function, because I know I find myself saying that too, right? Like, why did I do this? Or what was I thinking? Or, whatever the case
Why
is.
did I let that happen? Yeah.
Yeah. And then we kind of get stuck there.
Mm-hmm.
We really get stuck and we spiral.
Go
So
back.
part of it is understanding, and this is why I talk about the brain and I talk about kind of who we are as fundamentally as humans, is we are not the same person. We were not the same person then than we are now. Okay. We didn't have that insight. We didn't have that insight back then.
Yeah.
And we only got that insight from the experience that we have now.
Okay. I like
So
that.
we have to forgive and we have to have compassion for the part of us, the underdeveloped parts of us that stood in the way of us leaning into our values, which is our formative self.
Right.
So there's a lot of work that I do with people on forgiveness about the past self and what that looks like and how to be more self-compassionate. I actually do these very intense kind of exercises and they're life transforming, literally. And I do it, I mean, I do my own personal work in that way too.
Right.
And it's so transformative, literally, because our past self, so that example I gave this morning with that Facebook post,
Yes. Yeah.
I took a moment, I literally did, like after it happened, and I kind of was able to ground myself and recognize all the floods of feelings that were kind of coming up and surfacing for me because they were pretty intense.
Right.
I literally sat there and I paid homage and I gave credence to my past self, that teenager who suffered during that time and had the experience that she had.
Right.
I took 5 minutes and I literally sat there with her and I gave myself that kindness, for being able to heal that part of me.
Right. Right.
And I needed to because then I can't move forward. I just can't. It's not
Now,
possible.
did that pull you back into a place where then you could become mindful about what
Well,
was happening?
yes, because I became an adult. I
Right.
came back to myself. I came back to who I am today, where in the past I felt helpless and hopeless. And now, so I'll just tell you what it is because it's so interesting. Like you know, I I saw a group of people, right, who I would ordinarily kind of be part of the group and I wasn't included or what, it always happens to us, and
Right. Right.
I could rationalize why I wasn't included and whatever. It doesn't even matter, honestly.
But you still had the feelings that you had.
Yeah, but the feelings just kind of came up and I see
Right.
that the screen is a little, but
Yeah,
anyway,
your screen's kind of
we'll
flashing, but
just ignore it.
I can
That's okay.
still hear you fine. So as long as I
Okay,
can still hear you, we can keep going.
that's fine.
We can worry about
So,
that later.
okay, so what I did, which was so interesting, right? I went to a very helpless, hopeless place.
Mm,
And my first response, and then I got a text from somebody who apologized to me about something.
interesting.
And my first inclination, my first response was anger and rage. And I was
Oh,
like, screw all of them. Like,
right,
what?
right.
Right? Yeah. And I-
A
and I,
fear
I, to,
thing.
yeah, and I totally got into that primitive place. Totally.
Right,
Right. It's like like blaming and shaming the others, right? Like whatever.
right,
And then I stopped and I'm like, no, that's what I used to do. I don't need to do that anymore.
right,
Now I am an adult. And guess what? I could cultivate a group of people because I have a lot of really good friends really good friends that are more individual friends. That's
Right,
just
right,
whatever. And just last week, this is so uncanny. Just last week, I had lunch with a friend of mine. And I said to her, I said, I kind of feel like sometimes like I want to get together with a group of really like-minded people. And I feel like before COVID, I had that. And for some reason, I don't know, things just faltered after COVID. And it's just, you know, and
everything
then
changed after COVID.
yeah. And she goes, I feel the same way. And I said, you know what? Why don't we come up with like a nice group of people, like the two of us? And then she had one or two people she thought of. I thought about one or two people. And I was like, you know what? It's the summertime. We're all busy, but like, let's make it a point to all get together as a group because
Right,
like, it's such beautiful women that I honor and respect and like,
right,
have the same heart and same like vision and same passion and whatever. And I'm like, and I reminded myself of that. I'm like, you see, like I could do that. I don't need
right.
to be hopeless and
You don't
hopeless.
need those other people.
Well, it's not even, and I don't need to be angry and frustrated about it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
I need to be compassionate towards myself. And part of me actually, what came out of it was like, they're missing out. Oh well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I literally felt that way. I was
So
like,
was it intentional though? Like, did you intentionally go there, or did the work that you've done in the past
it's my
help you
work.
go there?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's the way I
Because
live.
we've
It's
all
the way.
kind of done that where we've gotten really angry about something and then we've tried to figure it out and then we eventually kind of get over it. But
But that
I think
process
it's the intention. Yeah, the
well,
process.
it's the process. The process by which I went through that literally was like a 5-minute thing. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
quick.
it sounds long and lengthy because of the way I'm
Right.
describing it, but
Right.
the cognition and the development of it and the processing of it because of my training and because of my
Practicing
methodology
it. Right.
allowed me to kind of move through that in literally 5 minutes,
Right.
And I'm not saying it's always so seamless, by the way.
Right. Because you'll go
So,
back, right? You'll go back and forth sometimes.
um, but the
Do you think
difference
you'll
is
go back
also,
to it? Do you think you'll
well,
go back to some of that?
I'll tell you, the difference is in the past, I used to repress my feelings because
Mhm.
that was like a protective kind of
Right.
mechanism by which
We
that I
do.
protected myself as a kid. So I
Right.
repressed a lot and I don't do that anymore. I'm very connected. Although sometimes things will come to me an hour later or 2 hours later, or
Right.
something
Right.
where it would be weeks and weeks or even months or not at all. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So that's different. That's much different. And so what will come back to me is sadness,
Okay.
not anger,
Not
but
the anger
sad.
anymore. So it'll
No,
change.
sadness that I've lost that something that I really loved and something that I appreciated and the people in that group. It
Right.
is. It's
Right.
also it was the group formation that I appreciated, that I love, that I miss.
Right.
And I give myself the time to mourn that and to grieve
Yeah.
that and to be sad about it. And guess what it goes back to? So this is the magic.
Yeah.
I could walk away and instead of saying to myself, they don't want me, I'm rejected, whatever the case is, I
Right.
could say to myself, Michelle, good for you. I could pat myself on the back and say, my value of connection, my value of friendship, my value, all of those values are so formative for me that, of course, I'm going to be disturbed and I'm going to be grief stricken if it's compromised.
Right. But it's
And I'm
still,
proud
but
of
you're
that.
still intact. Right.
But I'm proud of who I am,
Right.
that would evoke the emotions instead of beating down on myself for having the emotions.
Right.
I actually feel proud of myself and it reconnects me to my value. And then I will seek out what I need for myself in order to lean into the value.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome.
Does that make sense?
Oh
And
yeah. It
that is a
absolutely
big
does.
difference. That's a
Yeah.
big difference. And then I feel excited and I feel inspired. And I'm like, I'm going to seek out this group and I'm going to rival to the occasion and I am going to connect. And it's so cool. The group that I'm thinking about and that I spoke to my friend about, not that these people are not like, kind of it's a little bit of a different frequency. Like the group
Right.
that I'm going to be putting together is really like, I'm excited because it's like women who are like-minded and like passionate. And I know it's going to be such a like amazing connection,
Right. So you're excited rather than disappointed by
But
the other group, I guess, is the
I
thing.
still own the disappointment. I'm not just kind of, disregarding it. I'm
Right.
still owning
Right.
that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so we're getting kind of close to the end here. So I just want to ask you, is there something that I didn't ask or that we should say before we wrap up? And we can do another one if we want to come up with
Sure.
some more things to talk about. But
Sure.
is there something else that we should put out there or you want to put out there before we wrap up this podcast? And I know our
Yeah.
video is kind of messed up right now. I don't know if I'm messed up on your end, but you're
I,
flashing
I
on my
think
end.
I think Zoom wants me to have a big party and like go to
I know it looks
it
like a
wants
disco.
it wants me to go to the disco. Like I'm all for it. Listen,
That's what it looks like to me.
so I'm going to take that energy that I need
That's
to have
okay.
that
I
kind of
like it.
day.
Yeah, we can think about this however we want, right? I love it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the only thing I could say is life is so fleeting and it's so short.
For sure.
And I see it so often. We plan, we do all these things. We think we have forever. We think we have forever with everybody.
Yeah.
And, I see things that happen to people like, tragedies and like uncertainty and like things that are unexpected. And every moment is precious, and again, it might sound like a little bit, hokey pokey, but
Right.
like, but it's so true. It's so true. Life is so fleeting. I look at my kids, like just the other day, I have a 24-year-old. I'm like,
Like this,
how
right?
did that happen?
Right.
How?
Yeah.
Like,
People tell you that when you're younger and your kids are little, but you don't believe it.
no, no. And I think about that. I'm like, wow. So every day is worth living your best life. Like,
Yes.
not a moment should pass by where that should be taken for granted. I really mean that with my heart.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's a really good sentiment to wrap this up on. Okay, so tell me where people can find you if they want to
Yeah.
learn more. I know we talked
Oh,
about your YouTube and yeah, tell me
sure.
all that
So
stuff
this is
where they can
this
find
is
your
my
book.
book. It's called, I don't know if you can see it in the flashes,
Yes,
but
I
it's
can.
like
Yep, I can see it. It's nice.
Taste Your Life. And
Yeah,
it's
the
it's
cover.
my colors, so I'm excited. I
Yeah,
just also just like last week or so, I published my audiobook, which is I narrated it. So
that's exciting. Yeah,
I'm
I
so
I
excited
want to do
about
that.
that.
That's nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I'm excited, but I'm a big book person. Like I don't
Yes.
have time to read, so like I
Right.
listen to my book when I'm getting ready in the morning and whatever. So I'm so
Right.
excited. Like I give up people the opportunity who are not like kind of sit down and read.
Sure.
And my website, which is my full name, it's Michelle with two L's, and Maidenberg is Maidenberg.com,
Yes.
and it has all information about me, where to find me.
Awesome. I love that. Well, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today. I know you have a busy day ahead. You told me before we
Thank you.
started that your day's stacked. So I
Yeah,
want to respect your time, but I really appreciate it. And I'd love to keep in touch and learn more
absolutely.
about you. And I'll check out your mindfulness and your meditations on YouTube. I think that's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you, Julie. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, so this is Dr. Michelle Maidenberg, and I really appreciate you being here. Have a
Thank you
beautiful
so
week,
much.
everyone. Bye. Bye,
Bye.
Michelle. Thanks.